Hi everyone, this is Mr. Corzine. I just wanted to go through the 5.5 notes with you. This is the section that talks about specifically writing equations dealing with parallel lines and perpendicular lines. I think you probably remember from years past, you've learned that parallel lines run alongside each other. And even in chapter 4, we said those have the same slope, right? Perpendicular lines are lines that go opposite of each other. So they create this nice right angle in actually all four corners where they meet. So we want to know what that looks like and how that affects our equations as far as what it looks like in in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So let's get started. Here, it's a nice quick note for you. Parallel lines have the same slope. I'll give you an example. Y equals 2x plus 7. That line right there has a slope of 2, or a rise over run of 2 over 1. Another line that would be parallel to it is y equals 2x plus 3. Those lines wouldn't be exactly the same, but they would run alongside each other on the graph, going in a positive direction. Now, if you have perpendicular lines, the big thing is having that opposite reciprocal slope. So let's start with a slope of, say, 2. If your slope is 2, then the opposite reciprocal of that would be 1 over 2. That's the reciprocal. The opposite would mean it would change from a positive 2 to a negative 2. Okay, so these two slopes right here would be perpendicular. If I give you another example, if the slope was, let's do another one here. If the slope was, let's say, a negative 1/4. Okay, if I want to find a slope that would be perpendicular to that, I would have to flip it, and it would become 4, or 4 over 1, and it would also be positive. So this one's negative, and it's 1 over 4. This one's positive, it's 4 over 1, if you want to put that on there. Okay, there's your examples. Now let's look a little bit closer. Determine which lines, if any, are parallel or perpendicular. Well, as I look through these, I can identify the slope of some of them, and some of them I'm going to have to work out. So for this one right here, the slope is 3 over 5. Okay. For my next one, and I'm going to change colors here. For my next one, I can't tell what the slope is yet. I'm going to have to divide by 5 here. And it looks like my slope is going to be 3 over 5. I didn't rewrite the whole thing, but I can tell that's going to be 3/5. I'll change colors again. For this one, 10x minus 6y, I'm going to have to subtract 10x on both sides. That's going to make a negative 10x minus 4 is equal to a negative 6y. All right, and then I'm going to have to divide by a negative 6 on both sides, so I get a negative 10x minus 4 over a negative 6. When I find that slope, eventually it's going to be a positive 5 over 3. So the slope is a positive 5 over 3 because I got a negative 10 over a negative 6. All right, and then the last one, this is in point slope form. So I can see this slope right here. I'm going to change it. And the slope for this one is a negative 5. Okay, so which ones are the same? Which ones are different? I can look here and I see both of these are the same. So A and B are parallel, okay? And parallel is like these two lines kind of going together like that. That's an easy one. Okay, and then do I see any that are perpendicular? They've got to be opposite of that. So I'm looking for opposite of 3 over 5, so it's 5 over 3, but it's also got to be negative. Well, I see that down here. So a negative 5/3. So I'm going to say line D is perpendicular. There's a sign for that too, but I'm just going to write perpendicular to lines A and B. Okay, line D is perpendicular to lines A and B. I'm comparing them. I see here that it's the opposite, it's flipped, and it's the reciprocal, and it's the opposite because it's flipped and it has the opposite sign. Okay, well, hopefully this is making sense. Just recognizing is not enough. Okay, so I'm going to put recognizing here. Recognizing is a good first step, but now we need to be able to solve problems as they like involving parallel and perpendicular lines. So let's go to this next example where we need to write an equation of a line that is parallel to this one. It also needs to pass through this point. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to use my space. Y equals 2x plus 7. Now, if it's parallel to this line, I know my new line is going to have 2 as its slope. But I don't know what its y-intercept is going to be. And in order to find out what the y-intercept is going to be, I have to know, I have to input something that I know works for this equation. Fortunately, I have an x and a y value here. So I can write that in a -1 for x, and I can put in a 3 for y. And now I just solve this equation. 2 times a -1 is a -2. Now I add something to it to give me 3. Well, I add 2 on both sides. I'll just go ahead and work that out. Plus 2, plus 2. And now b is equal to 5. All right, I've got my equation. I'm ready to put it in because I know my slope is going to be -1 and my y-intercept is going to be 5. So the line that is parallel to this, that goes through this point, is y equals y equals 2x plus 5. There you go. I got the same slope. I've got a different y-intercept. The next one, I think, should work. For this one, man, it's got some interesting stuff going on. So I need to get y by itself. I'm going to subtract 3/2 x on both sides so I can get it in slope-intercept form. Now I've got y is equal to 3/2x minus 3. Okay, that's the line I want to match up with. It's got to be parallel to this. It's got to go through this point. So again, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do y equals mx plus b, and I'm going to plug in what I know. I know y is going to be -1, and x is going to be 6. So -1 is equal to, same slope, 3/2 times -1. Oops, sorry, that's not right. I got to use my 6. I used the wrong number. I'll go back. Here we go. Back to my lines here. Got my red line. 3/2 times 6 plus something. Well, 3 times 6 is 18, but I divided by 2. That makes 9 plus something gives me a -1. When it's all said and done, I subtract 9 on both sides. I end up with my y-intercept being a -10. Well, I've got the 2 pieces of information I need. I got my slope as 3/2, and my y-intercept as -10. So my answer is the line that's parallel to this one but passes through this point is y equals 3/2x minus 10. Ta-da! The next step for us is to do the same thing, only now with perpendicular lines. Okay? For perpendicular lines, I plug in my numbers, but I'm going to use this a slightly different slope. Here I've got a line. It's got to go through this point, but it's got to be the opposite reciprocal of this. So this one's really easy. I can add 6 on both sides to get it in slope-intercept form. So it's y equals -3/4 x plus 6. Now I'm going to go over to this side. I'm going to write y equals mx plus b. I'm going to plug in the things that I know. My slope has to be the opposite reciprocal. So it's going to be 4 over 3. I'm going to multiply that and use my x and y values. So it's going to say -8 is equal to 4/3 times a -9 plus b. When I multiply all this out, 4/3, like this is 4 times a -9, that's a -36 divided by 3. That's a -12 plus b makes a -8. I'll scroll down here. The last step is to add 12 on both sides. And I find out b is actually -4. All right, I've got my slope. I got my y-intercept. My equation should say that is perpendicular to this one. Y equals 4/3 x minus 4. Ta-da! All right. Now that went kind of fast, and you'll be practicing this some more. But I wanted you to see the basics of this. Last thing for these notes is you've got this flag of Scotland here, and you need to use the information to write equations for the lines line A and line B. Well, that's easy enough. I think we can do that. But then we have to tell if the line is perpendicular. The lines are perpendicular or not. Okay, so let's get started. Line A, I need to find out, actually, let's do that a little bit differently. Line A, the important information for line A is I need to know my slope and I need to know my y-intercept. Okay, let's look a little bit closer. My y-intercept for line A is actually what? 0. Okay, that's an easy one. Then my slope is going to be determined by going up 2 and over 3. Rise over run is 2 over 3. Easy enough. There's my important info for line A, and I can write my equation, y equals 2/3 x. And then I could write plus 0 at the end, but I don't need to. It's y equals 2/3 x. Well, let's look at line B. Line B, I need to find that important information, the slope and the y-intercept. The y-intercept is the same. It's going to be 0. Okay, oops, gotta switch that over. It's going to be 0. And then my rise over my run is I'm going to go down 2 and over 1, 2, 3. So it's a -2 over 3. Well, let's write the equation. Y equals -2/3 x. When I compare them, these slopes are reciprocals of one another, or they're not reciprocals of one another. They're the same, except for they have the opposite sign. So instead of being opposite reciprocals, they're just opposites. So the reason for this not being perpendicular is there's only one of the two requirements. So are they perpendicular? No. They are not reciprocal of one another. They're only opposite. Okay, and there you have it. Now at this point, you should know the basics of parallel and perpendicular lines. From here, I would like for you to move on to the self-directed packet, where it's asking you to graph lines on here on the coordinate plane and then notice things. What do you notice? Are the lines parallel or not? Are they going next to each other? And then what do you notice about the equations? Now that you have some understanding about it, I think you should be able to speak to, like, how are the equations the same? How are the graphs the same? In the end, after you get through all of this in your homework, you'll be able to draw some conclusions about like how to write equations for a line that's parallel or perpendicular. I think I was actually looking for something like this at the bottom, where what do you notice about the intersection of each pair of lines? Find a pattern and draw a conclusion that summarizes what you've observed. Okay, do your best to give me some really good thoughts on that. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you soon.